everybody. Welcome. This is No Bullshit Gaming Podcast, 2.5 Gamers, session number 11. We're discussing latest news, fun stuff, improving some knowledge. But also don't forget, this is a 4 a.m. conference discussion live sometimes, so let's not take it too seriously. We have a special guest today, so welcome Steve, and also, welcome Felix and Jakub. Let's start with Felix's favorite activity. Let's do the intros. Felix, please. Could you start?
Thank you, Matej, for that. I'm Felix. I do ad monetization, currently working at Forte, but everything ads related in games, that's what I do.
Yep. I can go next. Name's Jakub. I work as a game designer for the last 7 years, pretty much. Currently work as head of monetization at Traplight. And yeah, pretty much all game designy product stuff. That's my way.
Yeah, let me continue. My name is Matej. I'm the UA guy over here, working with several developers around the world, growing the UA budgets, games, and businesses. And Steve, how about yourself? Tell us about your career. What are you doing? What are you doing at the moment?
Who are you? Hey, I'm Steven-Elliot Altman, but you can call me Steve on this interview. It's shorter.
Nice. Thank you.
You have to use your writing name so that there's name recognition. If you call yourself something different on every project, no one will be able to follow what you're doing. So you learn as an author, you have to. That's how you're going to put your name on your first book. That is just your name for now on.
Okay.
I'm also a game designer, like Jakub, but I specialize in narrative design. The writing that goes on in the game, everything that from the dialogue that the characters are saying, if there is dialogue that the characters are saying, to the button that says start. I literally have to write start, and it could be all capitals or it could be capital S. You know, that's a stylistic choice that I have to make sometimes. That's what I do.
Nice.
Sounds great.
And which titles have you been involved in? Which mobile gaming titles?
In my gaming titles, the first game that I worked on was for DC Comics. And it was the DC Universe. First time they put it on disc, you could explore who the characters were and how their stories interacted and what their origin stories were. And that was kind of the first time that somebody gamified DC Comics in that form. But that wasn't really a game. But the first true game that I wrote was called Nine Dragons, and that was for a company called Acclaim. And that was a free-to-play MMORPG set in Ming Dynasty, China. Still being played. It's on its fifth publisher right now. That game's still going after 17 years. I guess I just
Nice.
dated myself. How long I've been doing this. And I wrote a couple of social games for Acclaim too. There was a game called Mafia Payoff that I did. That was. One of these mafia Facebook text-based games.
The good old Facebook games.
Yeah, and then later I started doing social games that lived on Facebook and then moved to mobile. I wrote where you guys are in Germany. I wrote a game called Pearl's Peril, which started off on Facebook and then went to mobile. I did some games for the History Channel. Based on some TV and feature products that they had, TV series. Ancient Aliens, the game, based on their show Ancient Aliens. Project Blue Book, the game, which Jakub, we can talk about that when we catch up to that one. That was a hidden object game set in the Project Blue Book universe. I'm leaving out a bunch of games, but my most recent game was Terminator Dark Fate, when the last Terminator movie came out, that I did for Skydance. So, I'm a science fiction author first and foremost. So when I'm working in games, they tend to lean towards more the science fiction genre. That's some of my stuff.
Okay. All right. And how someone become a writer for mobile games? Like, what did you do before? Like, I suppose you're writing books as well, right? Or like, how do you transition to mobile games?
That's a question I get asked a lot. Nobody.
I imagine
nobody really comes into this business the same way. We're all doing something else before we fall into it. Now, I mean, I guess let me take you back. I've been a storyteller since I was a kid. The storyteller. How do I explain the storyteller? The storyteller, if it was caveman times, yeah, there were the men went on the hunt, right? And they had to go kill whatever they were going to eat for dinner. And the women and children stayed home. So they weren't there. So the storyteller was the guy who was on the hunt, who then stood in front of the fire and told the story of the hunt to the women and children in this kind of dramatic way, like what happened. And so if this was caveman times, I guess I was that guy that got up and told the story. And then, I read a lot of comic books as a kid, and I was an only child. So that kind of puts you into your head telling stories. And then, I started writing comic books, and then I started writing books because I was an only child, so I was reading to myself a lot and telling stories to myself a lot, So I started writing books, and then I got a book published, and then I got another book published, and I became known as an author. And then eventually I became a best-selling author. And so that gave me a little bit of street credit, right? Because then games were just kind of at that point where they started putting stories in games. I mean, the evolution of games we could talk about forever, and the evolution of story in games in parallel. In Pac-Man, the only story is they meet, right? That's it. You don't really need to hire a writer for that. But later, as games became more and more complicated, game companies decided they wanted a story, and that storytelling that exists in books and screenplays and video games, it all started to converge to that the audience wanted a story along with their game, especially if it was a Batman game, right? They didn't just want Batman swinging and shooting and throwing the Batarang. They needed a little mystery and a little story, right? So I just was lucky enough to be in that kind of evolutionary stream where games needed writers, and they said, where do we look? Where do we get a writer? Let's look at movies and TV and book authors to get our writers from.
That was quite a nice intro, man.
Yeah, very good intro.
Very cool. I was really interested in hearing more about the creative process at the different stages. Like, how do you usually start? From thinking about what are you going to write? Are you doing any homeworks, or what's the process behind all of this? Because for what you just shared, I mean, it's super interesting.
Every game project is going to be completely different. Let me start you there. Sometimes you get called in and they've already built a game. And I think they had it in mind that the receptionist was going to write a story and just kind of fill it in. And then they realized that the receptionist had no idea how to do it, or tried to do it, and it wasn't good enough to be worthy of the game, of the beautiful game that they just did,
Yeah, so, and then you duct tape the whole narrative
story on top of the game.
So in this kind of a situation, you get pulled in, and then you really have to just sit down and immerse yourself in what is already there. And you look at how the game moves and how the levels are designed, and then you have to kind of craft a story and make it like a wrapper that will fit. And then in that situation, I had to look at what do the characters they drew look like, and that kind of looks like a soldier, and that looks like she could be the love interest, and then you kind of
Does that work? Does that work when you wrap something around like that?
You don't have any choice, right?
Does it work? Does it work? Yeah.
You don't have a choice. That's the thing.
right.
So I'll tell you why I can do it next. If you remember to ask me why I think I'm able to do it. So then you look at what the end point is, or sometimes the game is infinite. There is no end point. You might look at where the first chapter has to end, and then you have to kind of work backwards. I want to get to here, and then I need a middle point where everything changes that you thought was one way is suddenly revealed in a new light, and then you go, oh wait, I'm not really. I thought I was the good guy, but I'm the bad guy. Holy cow! So you've been manipulated by someone, and that person that you thought was your friend is the bad guy. But these are the same basic elements that are in storytelling, which you need in a movie script, right? So that in that way, you have to kind of mechanically work backwards and tell a story that will fit. And you might have to say, the story would really work and everything makes sense if you can change this game design element. And then you have to kind of beg and plead to the game designers, can we change this one thing? And usually they say, oh yeah, we can do that. And because I'm not just the writer that got brought in, I'm also a game designer, I know how to explain to him why I need this thing changed and how it can get changed at point A and point B and point C. So I kind of, to coax them, I do their work for them on what would need to be changed in the coding. And the more I know that, the more likely they will say yes and change it for me. And then that works there. And then, if they've only built chapter 1. You need to speak the same language. Yeah, if they've only built chapter 1, I might be able to influence everything that happens in chapter 2. But if the game is ready to ship, I might just have to get it in there, jam it in there as quickly as I can. And here, now, Felix, the reason I'll tell you that I think I can do this, because some writers would be like, holy shit, I don't know. Yeah, can we say shit on your show? Or are you going to beat me?
Multiple times, of course.
Right, that's fucking excellent. Good, then I can say shit.
No worries.
If there's any kids at home, please, this is an R-rated podcast. So the reason I can do that is because I spent 10 years in the advertising business as a copywriter. And as a copywriter, they literally walk in and say, the client is coming in 15 minutes, write a TV spot. And you're like, So some writers can do that, and some writers need to wait for inspiration. I didn't have this luxury. I had to just write a TV spot immediately. But what this does for you as a writer is for me, it strengthens a muscle that I think everyone has called create on command, my create on command muscle. So because I did advertising for 10 years under these crazy deadlines, and I didn't have time to wait for inspiration, I just had to do it now. That muscle in my body, that create on command muscle, is probably the strongest muscle in my body. So when I have to come in and do it, I just have to do it. Now, these are not ideal circumstances to write a video game, that you come in and it's already built. The ideal circumstances is
usual.
The ideal, that's only like 33% of the time these days. Now it's more typical that they bring the narrative designer in at the same time that they're creating the game. So this allows the narrative department or designer, I'm usually the narrative department of one, to be involved in every aspect of the creation of the game. And it's happened in various, it's different in every situation of the game. I mean, we could talk about individual ones, but right now I guess I'm giving you more of the general overview. So ask the question, and if we get to a place, I'll take you through more of how we did a particular game.
I think I've been there on the other side of the barricade as the designer with the narrator begging him in a way that it's always kind of like this kind of a conflict that how much resources or capacity do we want to sacrifice, on top of the story? And will this increase our KPIs, of course, because, that's the main priority in mobile. And then you Exactly, like you said, like I can feel the pain that the narrative department, like how about we have this and then and that, and like okay, like that needs to be coded that codes this, and this happens on screen in between there's dialogues and that and this, and offsetting capacity to it, and then like but we cannot have that because we first need to do tutorial, we need to do monetization stuff like that, and you get into this conflict. So I can feel it, especially after it's like you said in a situation where the game's already finished and you're just duct taping on top of it.
Well, let me just say. That's the other side of the coin, and it's great that you said that, because in the beginning, when I first started working games, the game designers didn't want a writer. What do we need a story for? Just shoot. Like, what do we need this for? So, I mean, the first job we have is to convince you that story is important. And why is story important? The main reason, and this speaks to your question of does it help the KPIs? Does it have an ROI? Yeah. Does it have a return on investment to get a storyteller, especially an expensive storyteller like me with my pedigree, to come in? Is that having a good story makes the game sticky, right? If you have a game, that someone just bought and paid $29.99 for, I mean, you've already made your sale. They're going to play that game. Yeah. But if you have a social game where people need to come back every day, stickiness really, really makes a difference. They want to know what's going to happen next week when the story goes on. They want to know what's going to happen in the next chapter in the next quest. They want a reason to follow the character because they develop an emotional investment in the story, and that's where the writer adds the most value. Why am I shooting these people? Why, instead of I'm just shooting. And, not everybody cares about the story, though. Some players just want to play. If there's a twitchy game, you're playing Tetris, you don't care. You just want to point and click and shoot. But a certain amount of people who play games want to read the story. And as time goes by, they're getting used to the story being there, and they want a good story. And if you have two hidden object games that you're choosing from, you really you're looking at kind of the top level, a few sentences about the story, and maybe that's how the person who likes story decides which game to play. So now you see that the writer has a value in the beginning. And you know what? Sometimes there's a marketing person writing that text, those 2 lines that help the player decide which game they're going to play. But usually that's also me. And that's only because I was in advertising, so I'm good at writing this advertising copy. So I'm using this other skill that I had before I was a game writer on my journey and in what I bring to the table as a writer.
Man, so I'm definitely the player that.
Sorry, that was a big drop. That was a big dump.
Doesn't read the text because it's just so annoying, at least for me. It's like, okay, so I don't care. But
you skip.
Like you said, I can imagine.
Skip.
Yeah, skip. Oh, well, there's a lot of text. Skip, come on. And then I have no idea what's going on in the game, of course. But I don't care. I just want to shoot, click, and play, and just enjoy that. But
that
you mentioned
wait. That brings up just a really quick side story there. When I wrote Nine Dragons, right, which was this Ming Dynasty kung fu game, I wrote the game, and then I handed it off to the developers. I didn't, and they were building, and so I didn't have anything to do for a while until the next set of quests came along. So I just hung out on the message boards, and my character, the hermit, spoke to the players. They'd say, "Oh, great hermit, what will the names of the clans be of the game?" And I would say, "Oh, Grasshopper," I would answer them back. "They will be Shaolin clan and Wu-Tang clan." And I kind of talked back to them in game. But then I said, you know what? I want to be playing the game. And Nine Dragons is an MMO. Yeah. For those of you who haven't played an MMO, you have an avatar that you design, and you're a character, and you put the clothes on them, and you're running around in this persistent game where everyone sees you. So my character, the hermit, was running around, and I had the game masters create a special avatar over my head that said Loremaster, right? And they gave me this power.
Oh, nice.
This power that I could kill a player. zap them and they're dead, right? And you know that if your character is dead, you lose XP, right? You have to respawn and you've lost your XP for the day. So I went around in the game and I met players who were used to seeing Game Master over somebody said, and they said, "What's the Loremaster?" I said, "I'm the one who wrote the story and the quests in the game." And I said, "Do you want to play? You want to play with me?" And they'd say, "Well, what are we going to do?" And I'd say, "I'm going to ask you a question about the lore of the game. And if you accept the question, and you can answer the question, I will give you a gift. And if you get the question wrong, I will kill you." Basically. And they were like,
Excellent.
And so now this is happening in the chat, right? So all the other players come to see what's going on, and suddenly we have an audience around us. And I asked my question, and if they gave it right, I would upgrade their weapon or give them some magic pill that made them really strong for 12 hours or something. And if they got wrong, boom, and I killed them. So even in that, I was adding an element to the design of the game that was not there. And I didn't work at Acclaim yet, by the way. I was writing as a freelancer and wrote for them, and then I went away. And then Howard Marks, the former chairman of Activision and now the CEO of Acclaim, called me in and he said, "I want you to come work full time and run events and start doing what you're doing in the game because you raised the revenue this month 35%. And I was like, "Okay." He said, "Nice. You're going to be the game director." And I was like, "What's a game director?" He's like, "You keep doing what you're doing, and we'll figure that out as we go." So this was a situation where a writer in a game where the story was important, and I started working in game development and understanding and adding more to the game than even the designers had placed there using story.
Nice. Okay. Well, I would definitely
but you had a question.
be killed by you for sure.
I hope you remember. I won't kill you. But I hope you remember your question. You died, though. You didn't know the story, so you would have.
Of course. Oh, man, 100%. 100%. Dead already. But so you mentioned hidden object games, but now you mentioned also MMO. So are there any game genres that are more suitable for narrative design, or you just can write everything because, well, you've done your job in the advertising industry for 10 years. Kudos, by the way. That's
Thank you.
That's not easy.
That's a really good question. I think almost any game could do with a little bit of narrative and to make it more of a brand. Because when you're making a game or a property, one of the holy grails would be that it could go further than the game. It could become TV, it could be movie, it could be a franchise, right? And a franchise is going to, some elements of a franchise are going to have a story. If it's going to become a comic book, it needs a story. If it's going to become a movie, it needs a story, right? Are some stronger than others? I mean, if it's a mystery, you definitely need a story. Sci-fi wants a story. I mean, adding even just a little bit of a story or a cute character and giving the character a name. And then once he's a character and he has a name and he's alive, if it's a male character, I don't want to get gender specific, he wants a girlfriend or a boyfriend, or then that's a love interest, and there's a story of how they met and what they do after they met. And so, I mean, I think we as humans want a story, right? Add it on to us. But
do these stories actually have an effect on the ROI and the KPIs in all genres? Because, well, even if you write a story for the characters, like, does it matter? Even though I wanna see and hear, like, okay, what's going on, but it's definitely not 35% increase on the revenue side as with the MMO.
Retention is important, right? So if the player plays your game, if it's a hidden object game, right? Before Pearl's Peril, where we did some very innovative things with narrative design, there was one character that came on the screen and told you what to hunt for in a game such as Gardens of Time, right? So that wasn't as appealing as having multiple characters in a dramatic situation with a cliffhanger where you wanted to know what happens next. And if you want to know what happens next, you don't start playing a different game. You relaunch your game tomorrow to tune back in. And this is the same model as television, right? If there was a 2-hour movie on TV, a television movie, you watched it and that was the end of it, and then you click over to another channel and what's the next movie? But if there's a television series like The Walking Dead, you want to know will your characters survive next week, so you come back the next day. So my first answer is yes. It's certainly, that is a clear way that it affects retention, and as you know, retention is going to bring you more of an ROI.
Yes, but you can't pay bills with retention only. That's the thing. But it's obviously very much connected.
That's not my part of the job, right? I'm supposed to.
Oh yeah, of course.
That's Remo's job.
And make the story dramatic.
That's Remo's job.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
But
I think
the people that like the story, they tell their friends, right? And then other people who like that kind of story come and play too. It's part of the virality.
Yeah, it's not black and white, of course.
Yeah, of course. Well,
one thing I can add to this is that I've seen the other players also that we talk about, that you have the Matejs of the world who skip the story and doesn't read anything and they just look for the skip button. But I see also the other ones who are, let's say, playing Gardenscape, sitting with thousands of stars in their inventory, their mansion still being a rubble, but they just follow the story. They don't care about refurbishing and revitalizing the mansion. They just care about the story, so they move fast to the puzzles and look through the story. They don't care about the stars anyway. So I've seen this live, that this is the retention driver for them. It's not the meta game that PlayerX planned for them.
Wooga actually did to go back to the RA question, they did some testing. And they talked about this at GDC, so I don't think I'm giving away any trade secrets here, where they wanted to see how important the story was, and they literally tested how long people were staying online watching when text bubbles came up to measure if they were reading the story. And they said something, I don't want to butcher their research, but they said something like if somebody was only there for 5 or 6 seconds, they were like Matej, and they were clicking through. But if they stayed for 30 seconds or longer, they were obviously reading. And I think if they stayed for 2 or 3 minutes, they probably went to the bathroom. But in this way, they were tracking how many people were actually reading the story, and at least they seemed to feel that they had accurate results off this. And then they went a step farther, and they matched the people that were reading the story to the people that were spending money in this free-to-play game, and it was lining up. And they said that the people reading the story were actually the buyers in the game. So maybe there's your answer for the story bring an ROI. They got it down to a science.
I'm just a bit curious as well, speaking there, how you're looking at the data, were you looking at any data points to influence your story arcs or character arcs when you're actually working, particularly with a mobile game?
That doesn't, I won't pay attention to things like that, because you got to remember, I'm in the front end of the game. I'm creating the script, and I'm often gone before they get to the point where they're receiving data, except through A/B testing. So during A/B testing, they might say, "Wow, we think your text is too long in a particular game." Which usually, because if you're just the writer and you come on a game, they tell you this many characters is the limit for a speech bubble. But if you're the narrative designer, which I almost always am, it's me helping to determine how many characters there should be in a text bubble and how many text bubbles there could be. And you're kind of gauging the player's patience level for story. Yeah. Right? I mean, different modes of writing, and I've been very fortunate to be in all of them. If you're writing a book, you get to write as much as you want, jump into different people's heads, tell the story however you want to, right? on paper. Then when I left New York and came to Hollywood and I was indoctrinated into writing the screenplay, that's a very technical document. At minute 15, you have to have all of the characters introduced, and the villain has been introduced but hidden as a good guy, right? You have to, at the minute 15, the protagonist has to make a decision to enter the new world and take on the situation that's coming on. If you think of the Wizard of Oz, that's the moment where we go from black and white. Dorothy is in Kansas in black and white, and then boom, she's in color. Actually, that happens at minute 30. I'm sorry, not minute 15. And enters the new world. Even in a romance novel, the character is single, and then all of a sudden decides to enter the new world of I'm going to be in this relationship. There's just certain moments that you have to hit in a screenplay. In a video game, things aren't laid out like that, but the story still has to hit these emotional points, right? And the interesting question there on all writing is, since caveman times, do we as humans need to tell hear a story in a certain way? And if it's not told in a certain way, we get bored and we leave? Or have people been watching movies so long that a story has been told in a certain way that we've come to expect it? And it doesn't matter. We have this story in our heads. There's the emotional low point, the darkest cave. The villain comes back one more time at the end, and you have to fight her. These story points that we all come to rely on, or the boss mob comes back one more time. We've internalized this so much the way a story is told that if somebody tells the story in the wrong order, we get a sick feeling. And the movie didn't work. The game story didn't work. The comic book didn't work. It's really interesting, but if you don't use these story points, you fail. No one knows really why.
Sounds like Tenet to me.
Oh yeah.
You know?
Was there any hints from the studio as for the story pacing? Because for me as a game designer, this is one of the biggest pain points, how to pace the story from capacity of the content treadmill that we need to create on, and then where to kind of cut it, because I guess there comes the cliffhanger part we've been talking about, because you cannot just pace the story like you want. So are you involved within the pacing of the story? How does this work?
In every situation I've been in, that's a narrative design. It's the game developers going, we don't know how you're going to put the story in here. So that's really me saying, it's good. I suggest we do it like this, and they pretty much follow it, because game developers don't yet. We're hoping for the evolution of it. They don't really understand how the writing mind works, and so they don't try to put barriers. They say, tell us how to put the story in the game. And in a situation like the Ancient Aliens game, for example, I came onto that project when all they knew was it was a city builder and you were building the pyramids in ancient Egypt. They didn't know why you were building the pyramids in ancient Egypt or who you as the player were playing. So I looked at it, and then I watched the show, which I don't know if you're familiar with the show, is about thinking about and asking questions about, how did we build the pyramids? We don't have the technology to build these pyramids now. Back then, they didn't have the wheel yet. They hadn't developed the wheel. So how did they build these precise instruments that are precise to a millionth of a centimeter at some points, that are, facing these planetary, how did they do it? So I said, well, there's aliens. Just like their show said there could have been aliens. So I said, I need a character that looks like a gray alien. And so I was telling the art department, make this character like a gray alien. And then there's Giorgio, who's this guy in the show, who's a sweetheart, who's usually the one he's kind of become the face of the show, talking about ancient astronaut theory. So I said, we need to get him in the game. And they said, how is Giorgio from the 20th century in ancient Egypt? And I said, I had to weave a story that said Giorgio was a teacher teaching in the present time, and I'm his student, and he asked for volunteers, and I volunteer to be hypnotized and regressed back to my past life in ancient Egypt. And so then,
Genius.
the circle spins, and I go back to. It's really funny too because it says, "Will you agree to be regressed to your past life in ancient Egypt?" And it says yes and no, and you have to click yes or no. But I told them whether you click yes or no, yes gets lights up. So literally, if you click no, yes still lights up because otherwise the game is over, right? So it clicks yes, which is we call this a magic trick, of course. So you click yes, you go back to ancient Egypt, and then you see camels. And you're in the desert, and then no sooner are you there, you're abducted by aliens, and you go up to the ship, and then they turn you into a human, half gray hybrid. And then they put you in charge of building the pyramids. And then you are the one recruiting the humans, and they're picking up bricks and building the pyramid. So that whole story, which acts as a wraparound because they were already building the city builder. But then from there, I said, we need a quest system. And sometimes the gray would come on and give you a quest, put 50 blocks on your pyramid, or, and then Giorgio, this character from the future, would come on because you're in a psychic link, and he would give you a quest. Find evidence that there were aliens at the pyramids. So you find something that shouldn't be there, right? You find a wrench in ancient Egypt, and then you're about to use this as evidence, but the gray comes on and goes, yeah, we have to destroy that wrench. So the first quest was find a wrench, and then the second quest was the alien saying, destroy that wrench. So I created drama. You see what I'm saying? But before that, you were just building a pyramid. So now I think that was actually a good encapsulation of how do you enter the story in there. And then to deliver the story, I needed a quest system, which was not in the game before I arrived. So the game devs had to build
the quest system.
A quest system into the game. So that was story, instructing, narrative design, and me begging the game designers to please build this quest system, basically. And then we had to get approvals from the actor, Giorgio, to be in the game. So it's all very interlaced,
How are you able to come up with these things?
Yeah.
You just, there's a little bit of this, there's a little bit of this. I watch movies, you guys watch movies, and some people watch a movie and just enjoy it. I watch a movie and I get inspired, and I want to tell stories. So, some people it goes back to, are you the storyteller guy around the fireplace that wants to come up with this? And some people have that skill, and some people, often the receptionist at the game company doesn't.
Are movies ruined for you this way because you can, see the pattern behind them as they're being told?
Yes. Yeah, actually, yes. Well, there's two things. If you live in Hollywood long enough, you know so many actors that you're watching. Like, I have a friend, James Cromwell.
It's ruined already.
I have a friend, James Cromwell, and I'm watching my favorite show. It was 6 Feet Under. And then all of a sudden in season 5 or 6, he suddenly came on the show as the love interest for Ruth, the mother in 6 Feet Under. And I'm like, no, I can't watch this. Now I don't believe it anymore. Right? It pulled me out of it. But that's one way that things get messed up. But for storyteller, when I transitioned from writing books to writing scripts for movies and television show, you're right. Suddenly you see the pattern in every TV show and every movie, and it does indeed ruin it for you. Because you're watching and you look at the clock and you're like, we're at minute 15, something has to change. Who was the
now
guy?
it's going to change.
Minute 30, everything's going to change, and minute 60, if it's a movie, everything's going to change. So it does. When you're starting out, it ruins it for you, because you're watching the skeleton, you're watching the machine. But then, once you learn the process of storytelling, then suddenly a magic thing happens that makes the story better for someone who understands than for the casual viewer, because you're watching it and it's hitting you on a subconscious level. this primal storytelling. But for the storytellers who are watching it, first off, when you see it bad, you really know it's bad. But when you see someone pull off in a creative way, you not only are satisfied as the viewer, but as a storyteller, you go, wow.
Yeah.
You really
like a skillful game design, yep.
You pulled it off, and it's like you're smitten with how the person wrote it, and it inspires you to want to tell your stories better. I often tell people that watching a bad theater play or watching a bad television pilot is actually good training, because when you see it done bad, you learn, ooh, don't do that, or don't tell a story, ooh. So it actually it's instructive for you in your craft to even watch bad television.
Is there some other inspiration that you are also thinking about? Not only movies, but obviously books, comics, and whatever else. Games, maybe as well.
You mean that inspire what you're writing?
Yeah, inspire. Yeah. What you are writing, like, where do you take the inspiration for writing?
I mean, I went to graduate school in English, man. So we read all the classics. I mean, there are just basic tropes and storylines that all trace back, to the Greeks. Boy meets girl, Oedipus. Boy meets girl. Girl in this case happens to be your mother. And then you poke your eyes out, which is a basic storyline. Or in Star Wars, you get your hand cut off. So you kind of have in your toolkit as a writer the different basic stories, and you end up using them and recombining them as you go, and the same themes, because we're human. It's the same love story or revenge story.
Works.
They come back. Yeah. If it's Red Dead Redemption, it's a revenge story. If it's there's just different kinds of adventures, and they all have their own basic rules.
By the way, do you borrow these kind of patterns from different movies or stories that you find kind of elegant to kind of transition somewhere? Because I do this with game design all the time. The more games you play, the more kind of systemic problems you can then reference. Oh, they solved it like this in this game. I can use that in my system. Connecting core gameplay to metagame.
Do you do that also? It's a fine line between borrowing and stealing. And plagiarism for you. I think it's more subconscious, again, because you know the pattern of how a story must go. By the way, for anyone out there who's an aspiring writer, what we're following is called the hero's journey. The best, if anyone who wants to be a writer, I think a book that I often recommend is by a man named Volker, who wrote a book called The Writer's Journey. And it lays out how to tell a story in a very simple, easy to understand way. And it asks you to track, as we mentioned before, The Wizard of Oz. The Wizard of Oz is kind of the perfect story to very clearly follow structure. I mean, in Hollywood, they took this book, The Wizard of Oz, and even did this trick with it that the movie itself would go, the first 30 minutes are black and white, and then at minute 30 they went into Technicolor, where they wanted to put into a film. So much so that changed an element in the book, which was Dorothy received these silver slippers in the book, but in the movie it was what was it? You remember what she gets in the movie? The ruby slippers, which were these bright, shiny red ruby shoes. So they changed that story element so they could take advantage of the fact that they were in Technicolor. And at minute 30 in a script, you have to go into the new world. And at minute 30 is when Dorothy lands in Oz, and everything, boom, goes into color to really illustrate it. So if you have this book, The Writer's Journey, and have the movie The Wizard of Oz, you can teach yourself how to tell a story, basically. So these elements are in it teaches you how to recognize, who is the trickster character, who is the mentor character, who's the mentor character in Star Wars. The first Star Wars, episode
Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Absolutely.
Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Who's the protagonist in Star Wars? The first movie. Luke Skywalker is the young hero. Yeah. And there's a moment in every story, just to give you a good illustration of how you can see it in everything, there's a moment in the story where the hero denies the call. It's actually, the point in the script is called The Hero Denies the Call. And doesn't Luke Skywalker deny the call at first when Obi-Wan says, I need to take you on an adventure? What does he say? You remember?
Like he wanted to play farming with the... Yeah, exactly. And they kill them over. They need to.
I can't go as far as they needed here. Aunt Owen, Uncle Henry, whatever their names are.
Ben.
I'm going to get Star Wars letters. I don't know your Star Wars. Is it Ben? Is it who? Anyway.
No. Obi-Wan is called Uncle Ben, and then he reveals he's Obi-Wan.
Right, yeah.
So he says, I have to stay. He denies the call. I can't go. Right? And then what happens? He comes home and they're dead, and then, all right, I'll go with you. I'll go on this journey with you. But the hero has to deny the call, even if it's just for a moment. Even if she goes, nah, I can't do it. All right, I'll go. But if that doesn't happen, you feel like something is missing. Right? So it happens. Now when you guys, next movie or TV show you watch on the pilot, watch for the...
Yeah, it's already. Already. I'll just look at the clock. It's like, 30 minutes. Now everything is going to change. I know. I know
So you put the same hero's journey into like mobile games. Exactly. So like next time I'm playing a story-driven game that you've written, I'll be able to tell as well. Like, here's where the hero enters, and here's where he...
And it's not just the hero. I'll make the smaller characters have these decisions. And here's another funny thing. The villain... Whoever your story is only as good as your villain. I learned really young. You need a really good
always, of course,
villain. But you got to remember that the villain is following the hero's journey in reverse. Because to the villain, he is the hero. He thinks what he's doing is right. He thinks what he's doing is saving the world. Like the Republicans in America. No, okay, I won't go to. I'm just kidding. You need to be able to look at your story after you've written it and go back and realize and see, did the villain's story make sense as a hero's journey from the villain's point of view? And testing it that way, you can see, did you tell a good story?
Okay, and Steve, how do you look at story when it comes to live ops, for example? There is going to be an event in the game. Is it a different process for the live ops events, or is it very similar and you're still looking at it the same way?
And well, sometimes I'm a freelancer. I'm rarely an employee of the company I'm doing the game for. So sometimes by the time the game gets to live ops, I'm not really involved, unless we're doing an expansion or we're adding chapter 2 or we need more quests. But maybe the right way to answer that is going back to Nine Dragons at Acclaim. Here I was, the Loremaster, running around the game. But later, when I started working more hand in hand with the devs, and we planned an event, then I would announce the event, a week in advance. We're going to have a scavenger hunt. I might have to say 12 of the greatest swords ever created were lost, and we must find them. So I had to put this event in the story of the game, in the marketing of the event, which it brought a more players to that particular time slot were coming. It dragged them there. And maybe then I'd say, let's have an item mall sale during that time where people will get these special glasses, maybe not in Nine Dragons, this special mask that will help you locate them easier. I'm making this up right now, but this is the bad example of it.
Of course, well, we have the special glasses right there.
Yeah, some item mall item that would help you in this, so that there was a sale involved with the event, and then I would decide where on the map did we drop the items, and I would of course be there, and there were different servers operating at different times. When it was night in Europe, it was day in America, and so I'd have to do the event 3 times so that I could hit them at the same event while they were awake. So there was a lot of coordinating going on. And then, sometimes there were game design elements that had to be hard programmed, or sometimes it was just story, or the game director, the game masters being in certain places to referee who found the item first, or did they collect it and put it in their inventory. So it was always variable how much game design or a game element was just about story.
And then after the art department, then comes the UA in. Then they look at all those lines and text you've wrote, and then they just use it in the marketing activities.
Well, funnily enough, because I come from advertising, typically on the games that I work on, I'm also writing the marketing copy right down to the Facebook posts.
Nice.
Okay. Jack of all trades, huh?
Like Pearl's Peril. In Pearl's Peril, I had to write the hook lines for each scene, basically encapsulating them that they, oh no, Pearl's in danger today, and this is happening, that they used to put in the game, which the players would send out to get energy, right? That was the virality of the game, was they would force out these small texts with an image from the game, which would hook the players, who then could friend on your friend list just read, this little snippet of Pearl is in danger in Atlantis this week. And if they were, she's in Atlantis, there's a game and she's in Atlantis. Okay, well, maybe I'm interested in that. So even those little pieces of text became the viral hooks that brought people back in. And I'm typically writing the back jacket copy on the game, right? Like what the game is about. But that's just because I'm bringing my marketing expertise in to help them write. And basically, if you have a good enough writer, they can flow like water into any part of the game that you need created, into the jacket copy, the marketing copy, even just like the start button, that's text. Any text that's in the game, a good writer should be responsible for that, so that it has continuity. It has the same flavor running through the character dialogue and all that.
Yeah, because you create some expectations with the creatives, and if you use the same messaging in the creatives, and then the very similar messaging is in the store, and then the players have some expectations, and those expectations are met in the game afterwards, then that's the perfect flow. Nice.
I'll tell you one thing: when you encounter bad writing, you recognize that, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's in a game or a movie or a TV show, it really turns you off, right? It can make you quit doing something, or it can ruin your willing suspension of, right? We're not really on a spaceship, but you're willing to go along and believe that you're on a spaceship. But if somebody opens the door to look out and they can still breathe, then you're like, all right, they don't know what they're doing.
That's it.
They're doing. And it's
I'm out.
So good writing is sticky, and it enhances everything else that's going on. And bad writing will kill it.
Yeah, and I think with that we can close the discussion, because this was it was so interesting.
Yeah.
It was really. Thank you very much for coming, and thank you everybody
My
that
pleasure.
you actually got
Thanks,
at
Steve.
the end of our discussion. And thank you very much, guys. Until next time. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
I'll be watching the show. I'll be watching next.